Today we're on to welcome Maddison Sutton to the show today. I'm very excited about this. She's a health coach. She is focused all about helping women kind of take back control of their health. And it's a really important topic because, you know, all the decisions and habits that we focus on every single day is really going to make up our health at the end of the day, right? There's so much information about how we implement it. That's where it's all at. So I'm very excited to have her on the show today. How are you?
I'm doing really good. How are you?
Doing great. Yeah, as I said, I'm excited about this. Try to get as much health information out there as I can, especially from people who, who've been through it and who have the story and actually have a heart of service. That's what it's all about. So I'm very curious to hear your story and how you got in the wellness place and where you are today.
Yeah. So I have had a lot of like little um, moments in life, I think, that have kind of brought me to this point, and they certainly didn't feel little while I was going through them, but I feel like it's been a collection of events that has ultimately brought me to wanting to make my career into helping women improve their health. And for me, that really started in my early 20s. I think, coming out of college, probably the least healthy time of my life, and noticing the physical impacts that that had on me, my skin, my weight, things like that. That's when I really started to become curious about health and just make small changes towards like bringing green products into my life, like sort of minimizing processed foods, things like that. And then from there, in my early 20s, was in a relationship with somebody who developed an autoimmune condition. And that was something I had never heard of. I had never heard the term autoimmune. Like, I was not educated on chronic health conditions. I wasn't even, like, I didn't even know this was a thing that could happen to us. So it was such a learning experience. And through that process, I saw how Western medicine sort of approached that autoimmune condition. I saw all of the trial and error, all of the waiting for doctors, not being able to get appointments, having to go to the emergency room, because maybe we couldn't get answers to certain issues. And that's a really frustrating process for anybody that has been through it, and it's a really scary process. So that was when I decided to really take matters into my own hands. I thought there has to be a better way. That surely this is not the answer for somebody that is healthy or seemingly healthy and young. Like, surely this can't just happen to you and you have no control over it. So that's when I got really, really involved, um, and really started just diving into the rabbit hole that is holistic health and wellness. And through that process, we discovered that, let's experiment with diet and lifestyle and kind of making what could seem like a massive change, but were very manageable changes ultimately. And that almost completely healed that autoimmune condition. So from there on out, I was just convinced. I was like, we are absolutely in control of the things that happen to us. And it was really important for me to live my life in a way that, I would avoid that happening to me. I wanted to make sure that, gut health was super important. Mindfulness was a part of my day to day so that I did not encounter these issues that I saw my loved one go through. And, that's kind of just evolved, further and further for me as I've gotten older. My father ended up being diagnosed with cancer about 4 years ago, and that was kind of the last straw for me. Just watching him go through that process, watching him pass away, and just really struggle with the healthcare system. That was what ultimately ended up pushing me to being a health and wellness coach. And I've felt that the biggest impact I could have was supporting women.
Absolutely. That's an awesome story. So it sounds like when this autoimmunity came about in your life from a loved one, it's kind of like we have all these questions. Like, it's the first time you're hearing about it. Actually, kind of remember that process for me as well. Like, what is an autoimmune disease? Like, how do I get well? Is it just that have to live with this, like all these things. And it was definitely an interesting time because navigating that was definitely a difficult circumstance, you know. And so, and it also sounds like they kind of propelled you to be a health and wellness coach after hearing all these people get diagnosed. It's like, no, enough. Like, how do we actually live our best life, you know?
Absolutely. So many people come to me now with a pre-existing condition or something that they're struggling with, and it's just become so normal. It's become so normal to have to take medication for certain things. It's become so normal to be uncomfortable and unhealthy. And so I'm really having to start from the very beginning with most of these people, and I think the message that I really want to ring clear and like true is you actually don't have to get to this point. There are ways in which you can avoid living with a chronic health condition. And it's not necessarily their fault that they don't know this, because, like you and I both experienced, I had no idea what this was. Why would you know if it's never personally happened to you? And most young people don't have to go through this. So our first time experiencing it is maybe after years of having those habits that actually create the autoimmune condition or that disease, whatever it might be. And there's a lot of kind of relearning that has to happen.
Absolutely. I mean, we have all these things that kind of go into it. And as a culture, we're kind of taught that, you know, there's just one size fits all when it comes to medicine, right? And there's always another story, though. And you like to talk about like all these holistic health strategies and prevention. Can you define what prevention is? Because a lot of people we may not know exactly what that means or exactly how we kind of play that out in our lives.
Yeah. So I think maybe in order to talk about prevention, I think we also have to talk about the genetics story that we are all told. And I'm not going to sit here and say that genetics don't matter at all, but the more and more we learn about the body and health, the more that we understand the future of our health largely depends on epigenetics, which is really your lifestyle and how it causes your genetics or your genes to express themselves. And I know that growing up, like for example, my grandfather, he has a heart condition. So I have always thought, oh, that probably is going to happen to me. He had a heart condition, or, this person in my family had diabetes or cancer. So these are things that will probably happen to me that are completely out of my control. And that is how most people think. That is what a lot of people think. And so this thought that if something bad is going to happen to us, like a heart attack or cancer, is out of our control, it kind of leads us to just live our life like that's going to happen. And it takes sort of the responsibility out of our hands. But if you think about this from a more preventative and more of an epigenetics, again, meaning that it's not your genetics really that are making the choice here. It's your lifestyle and your choices that are really, putting you on the path of either wellness or disease. Once you are aware that you have that choice and you have that control, preventative health is what you do every single day. It's how you live your life every single day. It's what you choose to consume. And when I say consume, I mean it's what you choose to like eat. It's the water you choose to drink. It's the social media or the TV or the books. It's the people you surround yourself. Preventative health is truly how you choose to live your life. And being preventative means you're making those positive choices for your future health, wellness and happiness.
100%. Yeah. It's like, it's not that you are what you eat, it's are what you eat, drink, breathe, as you know, as mental content as well. Like, what are you watching? What are you listening to? All these things. It's so important. And look, when it comes to preventative health, what is it exactly that we need to do as a fundamental process? Because disease, as you mentioned before, we have this mindset of that we're just going to get this disease, right? Of these genetics. And we kind of live in this victim state or this fear state. But the reality is, as you mentioned, there's so much that we can do, like epigenetics. There's like very few diseases that are actually caused by genes. I mean, some would say actually zero, but it kind of depends. But just having that mindset switch in our head is so key because once we do that, we switch from being a victim to being a victor. Now, what can I do? Right? And our beliefs are going to precede our actions at the end of the day. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. 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 Now, so I guess to that point, like a lot of times when I talk to people about health and wellness, even if it's just friends, I think we have so much like wellness content and biohacking and supplements and you need to do this and that and that. And I think what people are experiencing and feeling right now is a little bit of overwhelm. Like I often hear friends, they'll ask me advice or something, or a client will ask me, and I'll give them, my opinion of what they should be doing. And they're like, oh, it's just another thing I got to do. Like another thing I got to do. And people, they look at me as somebody who is a health and wellness coach. It's my job to do this. And so they just think that this is something that comes easy to me, something that I just enjoy. I just absolutely hate sweets and chocolate and I just love to exercise and go to bed. Like, they think of people that are able to do these things as somebody that is very different than themselves. And I think what I want to get across is this has been like a 15 to 18-year journey for me, starting with like very little steps. And I've been trying to like really get on a good meditation routine for probably 10 years. And I feel like this year is actually the first year where I'm actually meditating every single day. So it really is a practice. And I think it's super important to like this is why I'm such a big believer in people starting like their health journeys as young as possible and us encouraging that so you can really start experimenting like with the things you enjoy. I really think preventative health for a lot of people starts with healthy eating and then kind of evolves from there.
100%. Yeah, you mentioned these small habits that we do every single day because, as I talk about a lot, it's about the small wins. It's not about being perfect, it's about progress, right? Because we have all these things and we just kind of expect to do it all the way or it's nothing, right? But there's a lot of in between and you may not be perfect every day. Like for me, I have so many different routines throughout the day, but depending on certain activities or adjustments, you may have to, adapt a little bit and not do the same routine every day. So but the thing is that just keep going after it. It's not like you just kind of slip and you're done, right? Because I kind of notice that sometimes, like if we can't do it all the way, we just don't even try. And if you just have this purpose-driven mission, in a sense, like it makes it much easier to stay on path and on track with your goals.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that you say that because I think that I don't know, coming from the corporate space, I think we've really sort of lost the plot a little bit. I just saw a post and it was talking about how we're trying to streamline everything and, be so, come up with efficiencies and do everything quickly. And what we really need to be asking ourselves is like, what is the end goal? Like, what is the end goal? And I think I'm a person that always wants to be growing and evolving and learning. When I got into the health space, I was really focused on gut health. And now I'm way more focused. I mean, yes, I care about gut health and the physical aspects of it, but now I'm a lot more interested in like the mental and emotional side of health and the spiritual side of it. So I think kind of thinking about like what is the end goal? And really the end goal for me is I want to be happy when I wake up every day. I want, and like a big part of that is being healthy and being able to be mobile. And I want to be able to age in a way where I can still be active and walking around and not having to deal with chronic issues. And I think most people are not living in that mindset. They're kind of living in like survival mode and just, how do I get to tomorrow? Like, how do I kind of survive this time period that I'm in life? And so many of my clients, they're women in the corporate space. They're moms, they're wives, they have young children, they are trying to excel in their career, and they're in this survival place. Like they're not actually thinking about what do I want my life to look like really, and how do I want to feel like from a physical health perspective. That's the thing that they're putting on the back burner.
Yeah, before you mentioned like we have all this information coming at us, whether it's podcasts, books, media, whatever it is. How do we actually filter information to actually work for us? Because it's not that it's inaccurate because there's a lot of contradicting points, but they're actually both true in a sense. So how do we actually filter that and do what works for us?
So really happy that you used the word filter because I heard somebody else on a podcast use that and I've sort of adapted that term because like you really have to filter it out. And there is not a single wellness expert that I agree with every single thing that they say. Not a single one. And there are plenty of things where I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. That works. There is so much science to support veganism. There is so much science to support, the keto diet or, certain diets and, hit or not doing hit. Like if you want to like prove that one modality or health trend works, you can. But I think where the filtering comes in is I think that's your own sort of compass. I really think you have to get comfortable with the fact that there is no one right answer for everybody. I think that's so, so important to know. Like, yes, I think there are some fundamental truths. Like, I think one for me is, ultra processed food. Not going to be good for anybody. Like, that's pretty much a universal truth. But there's some that are a little bit more gray. So I think what you have to do is actively try to educate yourself, you know, but you have to find what resonates with you. And you also have to know that what resonates with you may change. And that's okay. What you need for your health and wellness may change and evolve as you change and evolve. Right now, I very much believe in eating like a well balanced diet that includes meat and eggs. But you know what? Maybe when I get older, I'll have to lean a little bit more vegetarian for some reason. You just really never know. So when we talk about filtering out the noise, I think that's where the intuitive part of health comes in. You have to maybe listen to this health expert or this podcast or read this book. And if that bit of information feels good for you, and if you're like, you know what, that actually makes a lot of sense to me, maybe I'll try that. And if you try that and it works, great. If you try that and it doesn't work, or it doesn't actually feel like you thought it was going to, then maybe that's not for you. And so I guess what I'm saying here is the filter is really that internal knowing, it's that internal compass, it's listening to what feels good to you. It's kind of your internal BS meter. There's some things people say, and I'm like, surely nobody's believing this. I cannot believe that this trend is going viral because surely nobody believes this. But people do. And so I think it's really just that internal knowing. And also being a little bit patient. I think people don't like that sometimes health is a little bit of trial and error. And it is, but that's also kind of a beautiful thing. Like, again, we're not trying to rush through this. We're trying to figure out what feels good and works for us.
100%. I love that. Listening to your own inner guidance is key, right? Because we ultimately can listen to all these things, but the most important form of knowledge is experience, right? Putting these things into play. And all these diet experts, they mean well, and their diet does work at certain times and for certain people. But the problem is when you say this thing works for everyone, you got to focus on the person's state of health. You got to focus on their goals. You got to be willing to, not just give your thing to that person. You have to adapt your approach to them, right? And as a coach, like that's one of the most important things.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I think maybe a good example right now, I'm not eating dairy. I don't have a dairy allergy. I don't think dairy is just innately bad at all, but it's kind of what works for me right now. And I'm fully confident that I will probably incorporate it back into my diet at some point. But, I'm kind of just following my body right now and what I'm going through. So yeah, I think your point of when somebody says this works for everybody, that is a red flag. Nothing works for everybody. The healthiest foods, superfoods, whatever, there are plenty of people that cannot eat kale or avocados, and maybe it's because they have some digestive issue that's going on or whatever, or maybe they're actually just allergic to avocados. It You cannot use these all statements.
Definitely. Out of curiosity, like if people want to become a health coach, like what do you recommend doing? Because I feel like coaching is so important and it can really do a lot of good in the world, not just in health, but like in all aspects. Like being a coach is so important. Like, what do you recommend if people want to get started?
Yeah. So for how it worked for me was just an interest, doing a lot of research on my own. I ended up getting my coaching certification through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. There are plenty of coaching programs that are out there and that are available. I think maybe if you want to become a coach, part of it is trying to narrow down like what is your actual passion because there are so many different avenues that you could become a coach. I definitely had the passion, but needed more coaching on the actual coaching. It's just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean you can be a coach. I'm not always the most patient person. So, like, those are things I had to learn and skills that I had to grow. So, I very much think that actually learning how to coach is really, really important. The passion's got to be there, but the coaching's got to be there as well. And, I ended up actually getting my coaching certification, then doing coaching. And after about a year of coaching women, I went back for further education. I ended up getting my FDNP because I wanted to do functional lab testing. And I think part of being a coach, especially a coach in the wellness space, is you have to know that you will be learning all of the time. We are making such strides in the health and wellness space that information is changing. And what we know or believe to be true may not be true next year. So I think if you want to be a coach or an educator in any space, you have to commit to learning and growing. I think that's why so many people are having issues with like the traditional medical space right now is people are kind of becoming more awake to the fact that like there's a lot of nutrition and like health information that a lot of older doctors were not taught. you know? So it's kind of like our health knowledge is evolving, but maybe our Western medical system has not evolved with it, which is why we're seeing such a gap in trust in the medical field right now. So, we got to keep evolving. You got to keep evolving if
Yeah.
you want to be in this space.
And as you mentioned before, is when it comes to information, like there are certain fundamental principles, right? There's certain things that you can't really get away from, like certain laws of the body and things like that, right? But then adapting your approach within that. So along those lines, I feel like, personally speaking, if you want to develop mastery, like in something, and we're talking about coaching, I personally believe like there's so many things you can follow. I mean, I just recommend like listening to one or two people and just kind of putting everything into that because everyone has different learning styles, different teaching styles. And I'm not saying not to listen to other people or read other books and things like that, but always like come back to that person I find. Because I feel like,
Yeah.
because like if you're listening to like 30 different things, it's like, it's hard to kind of, because they're all different perspectives, right? And it can be good in some aspects, but if you want to develop mastery, I find this kind of narrowing your focus and just being kind of relentless, as you said, and being a lifelong learner, in a sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there are actually, I have like two in mind right now, like two doctors that I very much believe in the way that they approach health and wellness. And I have always really kind of looked to them if, I want to dive a little bit deeper into a topic, or they're sort of my trusted sources. Like if there's something difficult that I'm looking at, or I want a little bit extra information on a client, like I will like find a podcast and like educate myself further specifically with those two doctors, or I will look at the resources or the books that they have. Very much agree with that. It's funny because now I'm seeing that those doctors are starting to maybe fall into like supplement brands that maybe I don't actually align with, or they're sort of supporting products that I don't really align with. So I'm at this weird point where it's like I'm evolving, and like the people that I have trusted for medical advice may be changing. But
Hmm.
I completely agree with you. Don't try to listen to different people, or like a ton of different people for
Yeah.
your health advice.
Other thing is, I would just remember like listening to the same things over and over again until I kind of like ingrained it. Because like science can it can be kind of like a second language in the beginning, but then you just kind of become more fluent. So it kind of been my experience.
Yeah, yeah. And I will say one thing I've noticed is because I've been in this space, I know where to get my information from. I'm not just gonna like Google a symptom and then go to see what the Mayo Clinic has to say about it. That's not where I'm gonna get my information. Like, I know I'm going to be looking at certain functional medical doctors that I trust for the information. I'm not gonna, what I'm searching for is not at the top of Google.
Yeah, and also like kind of filtering it through your purpose as well, like and the people that you actually want to serve, in a sense, because there's all this information, but what are our goals at the end of the day? It's keeping service on the mind, like being growth oriented, and that kind of helps you learn in a sense, because once you learn it, you're able to teach it in a sense. And there's a saying that says if you can't explain it simply, then you don't know it well enough, right? So kind of like just being cognizant as you learn, it kind of makes it fun as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think and something that I probably am pretty bad at, or this is like a fault of mine, because I'm in the health and wellness space, I kind of assume certain things are common knowledge when really they're not.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it is kind of coming back to that, Madison, like you need to really enter this at like more of a basic level when you're talking about it with clients, because you think this is something that a lot of people know, but it's actually not.
That's a good point because like just sleep quality, for example, like we like in the health and wellness space, we can talk about that. Like we already know, but when it comes to most people, like we have to keep in mind like this information, even though you've heard of it like how many times and you implement it, most people don't actually know. They
Yeah.
really don't. So, you know, that's why it goes back to the fundamentals, like mastering the fundamentals. That's what wellness is. We can have all those fancy things, but you know, what are the things that our body actually requires?
Yeah. I had somebody ask me about biohacking this weekend. They were asking me about Brian Johnson. They're like, what do you think about all this? What do you think about biohacking and longevity? And I was like, I think it's great, but I think most people aren't there yet. And I think that's kind of, my issue with the health and wellness space at the moment is there are 1,000 supplements. I have clients all the time ask me, what about red light therapy? What about, cold plunges? What about, the vibration plates and things? And so many people, like I have a client, she doesn't want to work on her diet, but she wants to buy a vibration plate. And I'm like, the vibration plate is not going to help you. Like that is not the answer. Like I think that the biohacking and those things are really, really interesting. And I think if you have the basics down, then absolutely explore that all day. But those things are not going to get you anywhere if you are not interested in improving your diet, moving your body, sleeping well, and taking care of your mental and emotional health.
100%. Yeah. Biohacking, I feel like, is also an overused term. Like people, they say healthy eating is biohacking. Like all these, I mean, to me, it's like the use of technology to improve your health. Like, as you said, the fundamentals are key. I mean, I do all the things. I do the red light, I do the sonic cold therapy, whatever. What I say is the most important practice I actually do is standing in the grass, sunlight, and fresh air in the morning, nature. Getting your mind right. That's the most important thing I do. And it feels so good afterwards, like half hour a day. But then you add in the other things. Because I remember getting well myself. Like I didn't really have any of the fancy biohacks. I couldn't really like spend things on that. But, I had the will to get better. And what people don't understand is nature, like a lot of things we can do for health is actually free. And we just have to, know how to use it in a sense. Like, are you actually getting sunlight? Are you actually taking a walk? These simple things that it makes you feel so much better, but it doesn't really cost you anything.
Absolutely. And I go to a sauna and I like do the sauna, then cold plunge, sauna, cold plunge. Like I love that. That's something that I really enjoy. But I just like you, I'm doing the basics.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny because, you know, I love to go on my morning walks. Like I really like to get outside in the morning. That's super important for me. I do think for certain people, a certain basic is maybe more important than others, if that makes sense. Like all of the basics are important. But I will say for me personally, I know the thing that I need above all else is sleep.
Yeah.
So my other health basics and preventative health sort of revolves around that. And I eat a healthy diet. I'm very, very clean with my diet. That's really how I got into this was through improving gut health and making sure that everything that I was putting into my body was as clean as possible. So that is super, super important to me. But I would say one of the reasons that that is so important, obviously long-term health, but I also know that it improves my sleep, which is kind of like my number one thing with health. I think for some people, their basic that they love the most is the physical activity and how much that is helpful for not just the physical body, but also their mental and emotional well being. And for you, like your favorite basic thing with health, and again, these things don't cost anything, is going outside, standing in the grass, getting the sunlight. So, you know, and then I also have my weaknesses. I'm not great at strength training. Like that's just not my favorite thing. I do it because I know it's important, especially as women age, that's super important. But yeah, I think getting a good variety of all of those different basics is so important. But I almost think that there's like, sort of your favorite ones are the ones you lean on more heavily.
That makes sense. Like, listening to your body as well. Like I wrote an article recently on somatic therapy, basically like healing through the body and the mind, like with cold therapy and meditation, all that. But essentially, once you learn all these things, you kind of tune in to see what you actually need. You may need more of something some days, sometimes less, and also giving yourself permission to change. Like in the gym, for example, you may not be able to go in there and crush 4 sets every single time, but can you do one? And can you celebrate that? Like making those small progress wins every single day.
Yeah. And I think listening to your body and knowing when you need to ramp up in certain areas or maybe take a step back in certain areas. I will say that like working out, doing heavy hit, exercises, like the physical aspect of health was super important and probably one of the things I relied on the most for my health when I was in my 20s. And when my father was diagnosed with cancer, I think because I was under more mental and emotional stress, and this is kind of where a lot of my clients are. Like a lot of them are under a lot of mental and emotional stress, and they want to keep pushing themselves really heavily on the physical side of things and in the gym. But I know for me, during times of heavy stress, that is a time when I actually need to take a step back on the physical activity. And that's when I need to lean into more of like the yin, exercises, walks, yoga. So it's kind of like understanding where you need to put your energy and again, just listening to your body. Um, and during that time, I really didn't do like the heavy strength workouts. I really leaned into like more of the meditation and the journaling and just walking. And now I'm at a place again where I can ramp up the physical activity again. So, your body, it goes through these ebbs and flows. And I mean, just like the seasons, it's natural and it's okay. And I find a lot of women that beat themselves up because they don't have the physical energy to actually go to the gym and like put in a lot of time into their physical workouts. But these are also women that are like so mentally and emotionally just exhausted and just so stressed out. And so a big part of like what I try to teach is maybe that's not what you actually need right now from a health perspective.
Definitely. I mean, I feel like a lot of us, we just think of nutrition and exercise as pillars of health, right? Which, of course, those are super important. But there's so much more to it. We can talk about physical, we talk about, earthing, we talk about sunlight, we talk about minerals, all these types of things, and mental and emotional health. Like, that's what holistic health is. If we actually look at the word, it means all of it. Like, neglecting some of it, I mean, because a lot of times you hear, oh, this person just developed this disease out of nowhere. They're eating healthy, they're exercising, but the reality is, are they sleeping? Are they in a terrible relationship? Are they, did they just hate their job? Like these things that people don't think about.
Yeah. I think lack of alignment in life is one of the biggest causes for health issues. It's being in the bad relationship. It's being in the job that you hate. It's having to commute to work, 2 hours every single day. People don't like to believe that this is what's causing their health issue, but the longer I'm in this role and in this field, the more I believe that like lack of alignment in life is what actually really leads to chronic illness and not listening to your body. And yes, following the basics, but maybe kind of learning like really what do I need right now? What do I need right now? And what should I be cutting out?
Yeah, and real talk, like most people who believe they're eating healthy and they're working out, like they're really not. I mean, it's not their fault because they're listening to advice. It's just the problem is that, back to earlier, like becoming a health coach, if you go to college, you're going to get information that is funded by Pepsi and can't believe it's not butter and General Mills. It's like, I've talked about that before, but
Yeah, it's really, and it's no wonder that everyone's confused. I feel like half of the battle when I get a new client is saying like, no, you don't actually need to worry about that. I know you've been told your entire life that you need to avoid fat, but it's actually, maybe the type of fat that you've been eating that's wrong. You don't need to be so worried about your caloric intake. It needs to be the quality of your food, not the quantity of your food. There's just so much unlearning that has to happen. So it's truly no wonder that people are confused. I really understand it. And that's why I am a big believer in just really getting curious. Like, I think you have to get out there and do your own research and do your own digging. And if you're being told something by a doctor or a health coach, or if you're hearing something on the internet or reading something and it gives you this like little, I don't know, I just don't know about that. You should explore that further. You should listen to that doubt. You should listen to that little voice that's saying, I don't really know about this. When going back to my autoimmune story, really the last trigger for me was they were going to put the guy that I was dating, they were going to put him on this medication that he was going to have to take for the rest of his life. And the way that it was kind of communicated to us was that he would have to take this for the rest of his life. It may or may not work, but he'd have to keep taking it because if he stopped taking it and needed it again, his body wouldn't react to it anymore. So it was like we were put in this really kind of impossible situation where we had to decide if he was going to take this medication regardless of if it worked. And this was like a pretty heavy medication with a lot of side effects. And everything in me was screaming, this is not right. This is just not right. And I'm so thankful that I pushed back because I was the only person that pushed back. He was scared and he was willing to take that medicine. His family, who was in the medical field, was super okay with him taking that medicine. I was the only person that said, yo, this does not sound okay. There's just no way that this is right. So you have to advocate for yourself and you really have to stand up for yourself when something does not feel right for you.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the placebo and the nocebo effect, right? Because it's essentially having this positive injunction of the thing, whether it's drugs, surgery, and it's really the belief of the thing because they're not actually getting that. And it's usually 33% effective most of the time. And then the flip side of it, it's kind of what you mentioned a little bit. It's like you get this fear induced diagnosis, right? And you have to do this thing for the rest of your life. And there's actually studies showing, I don't know, it's kind of terrible in a sense, but they kind of give you this cancer diagnosis even though it's not real. Then they end up experiencing all these symptoms of the chemo and all that, and it's literally not even, it's their mind. It's been documented. It's insane.
Yeah. It's horrible. I mean, and even I think there's a lot of statistics around like if somebody is given 18 months to live, like they will die within that 18 months a lot of the time because it's there is such a heavy mental aspect of this. I mean, I really witnessed this firsthand with my father, unfortunately. I really wish it hadn't been that way, but when he was diagnosed, like he truly believed the only options that he had was the surgery, the chemo, the radiation, and he believed that he had an incurable cancer and he was going to die within a time frame, and he did. And because he believed those things, even though I tried my hardest to sort of educate him in other ways, when somebody has their mind made up and they're not really open to other possibilities, you're kind of, you're putting yourself on the path to that less than the desirable outcome. Um, I think your mind is, and your mind and your mentality and your outlook on life are your greatest healers if they are positive, and they are also what can really cause you to go in a really bad direction or keep that sickness or go downhill quickly if you are not thinking positively.
100%. So when you work with people, what do you find is the obstacles to actually getting well? Because the information is out there, but what is if somebody really wants to get well? Like, what is actually holding them back from doing so?
Themselves. I really think it's themselves. And that's something I try to really work on kind of behind the scenes a little bit with my clients, because oftentimes they'll come to me with, the biggest thing is weight loss. Like a lot of women are unhappy with their weight, but they also have some sort of chronic issue that's going on. And most of them don't actually believe that they can overcome this condition or that they can lose the weight because they've been struggling with it for so long. It's part of their identity now. And so a lot of it is trying to get to, like, kind of trying to get them to admit in a way and, like, become aware of the fact that maybe part of them doesn't think that they can overcome this. And that's not something that we want to think. I struggled with insomnia for the majority of my life and took medication for it, you know, a lot of self-medicating with marijuana, alcohol, everything. And it actually took me acknowledging that a small part of me did not want to sleep well, which is insane, right? Like, that's so crazy. Why would I want to feel like crap? Why would I not want to sleep? But there was like another anxiety there that was kind of fueling me not wanting to go to sleep. And really, it was lack of alignment, I think, in my life at that moment, and anxiety about what the next day would look like. That was contributing to me, a small part of me not wanting to fall asleep. And so I really think that's the biggest obstacle is there is a lot of times a mental block, a subconscious block that you don't even realize that is there, that is keeping people from getting well and achieving the health that they claim to desire.
So it sounds like our beliefs play a huge role in that. Like, how do we actually uncover these things that are holding us back? Because I believe like the first step to change is awareness, right? So if we have these things like we may have not have dealt with, how do we begin to kind of shed the light of awareness on that?
Yeah. I will say that a big like avenue I like to push clients into is journaling. And I think, kind of the same maybe strategy that we're taught in health coaching is just continuing to ask why. Like, why? Why do you feel this way? Why? Why? Just like keep asking yourself, why? Why? And I believe in journaling because I think it allows you to access your mind in a different way. I believe that it allows you to be honest in a way that you probably would not be with a therapist or another person. And it has a way of uncovering maybe why you actually feel a certain way or why you are actually encountering a certain obstacle. So I'm a big believer in journaling. It's something I suggest to all of my clients. I really, really push them to do it. And I'm a big believer in just really journaling in the morning. I believe in unprompted or, no prompts for journaling, just kind of writing out like what you're feeling about the day. Are there any things that you're nervous about or worried about? If I didn't sleep well, I'll journal about, not sleeping well. So I think that is a really good gateway to better understanding yourself, and it will naturally evolve into you learning more about yourself.
100%. I love journaling. I mean, the way I do it is I like to buy other people's journals that have like these pre-made questions. Like I'm going through Tony Robbins' journals right now. It's so good. He's so sophisticated with what he does, and it's his exact processes. So And I like to have a goal setting journal at the beginning of the year, kind of like my own thing, and kind of go through that. But there's so many ways to do it. I mean, journaling is such an important practice.
Yeah, it really is. And, it's so funny because I really think that like men sort of need a slightly different approach than women need. And some of the women that I work with, they really like the guided, journals. And then some people like myself really like to just be able to sort of like free flowing. And I think when you are just starting out on journaling, probably doing the route of like the prompts works for some people. And again, it's how your mind works. I actually just bought a book, and I'm not going to remember the name. It's like Creative Alchemy, I think. Do you know what I'm talking about? If not, I'll have to look it up. But it's different prompts, and they're meant to kind of get your mind working. And it's not like necessarily a prompt for journaling. It's stories, and then you're supposed to sort of journal like what comes up for you with these stories. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like getting ideas flowing is key. Like another thing is questions. Like the quality of the question is going to determine the quality of our answers at the end of the day. And I feel like a lot of us have these negative questions on a repeat in our minds, like why me? Why is this happening? But if we can actually begin to become a better question asker, it's, and I feel like part of that is just learning how to be present, like present to the moment and whatever comes up, because then we can kind of guide the questions with the moment in a sense to reach our goals.
Yes, I have seen a lot of clients that really just when they journal, it's really short and it is sort of that why me, or it's that negative thought process that they're getting down on paper, and it's hard to get out of that, but it is a lot of pushing them towards how do we stop being the victim in our own story? Like, how can we overcome this? How can we become the main character that we want to be? How can we become the person that we want to be?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many tools out there, and kind of like we said before, we got to find out what works for us. Like, can we do it all? I mean, probably not. Like, there's so many things, but of course, you can do experiments and all that. But I find that what works for me is like, you know, being purpose oriented and knowing your values, your standards, all these things is so important because then you can actually live a life that is purpose driven, and you know what to say yes to, you know what to say no to, and you know what you accept, you don't accept, and it kind of, because a lot of things I find is like we kind of leave, we live a life that's not as fulfilling as it can be. We kind of major in minor things. We have all these things going on in our head, but what actually matters for us, and finding that out, it can lead to actually taking care of our health as well, because now we have a stronger why.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it is. It's going back to what do I actually want out of life? And, I'm not a big planner. So typically, what I will do when I wake up is kind of ask myself, what do I need today? Last night when I went to bed, I had grand plans of like doing a heavier workout this morning and like going on a really long walk and like doing all this stuff. But I actually didn't sleep that great last night. So instead, I woke up and I'm like, all right, is that what I need? No, actually, I think I'm going to do a quick yoga, and I'm going to do a longer journaling session. I'm going to do a longer meditation. Like, that's what I need. And I think because we're so busy doing all of these things that do not fulfill us and do not make us happy. I mean, we are so busy doing things that we do not want to do that most people don't have that time to actually ask themselves, what do I want out of this day? And what do I need, like from a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual wellness perspective, in order to show up well for myself and my partner or my children or even, work? Like, what do I need to do to make sure that I show up as the best version of myself?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many distractions throughout the day, but can we be okay with not getting everything done? Because I know it can be frustrating sometimes to not have these routines going that actually help us feel good. But, life is going to happen. And learning how to accept that is key, I find, because, you know, we're doing all these things and we're kind of frustrated with not reaching all of them. But sometimes I have to remind myself, like, hey, you're on your purpose, right? You actually have a mission. So at least you're failing on your own terms. Like you're not living someone else's life. And you just gotta, focus on the small things sometimes, like have gratitude and just, like as you said before, there's seasons to things, and just making progress is key.
It is. It is. And I think mental health has declined so much since COVID. And I think a large part of that is for people that were working remote, there became like an urgency. There became no separation between work and home. And I think a lot of people have continued that. A lot of people are working well into the night thinking they need to respond to things immediately. And I think, a practice that I really started like taking when I was still in the corporate world, like when I started dating my now partner, I was like, I'm not working after 5. I want to put time into my relationship. I want us to cook dinner together every single night. That is my priority. It's not answering this email. And I made that decision. I never looked back. And guess what? My work did not go downhill. I was promoted. Like I was still showing up just as well. I was still getting the recognition. I think we think that people are going to be disappointed in us if we don't respond immediately or if we're not, getting back to that client or that email. And that's not the case. That person doesn't want to be working all the time either.
Yeah, I mean, taking care of yourself is really going to allow you to show up for your best self and be of service. Because the reality is, people don't want the average rundown you; they want the best version of you. In order to do that, you have to really prioritize your self care and prioritize what actually helps you feel vibrant in a
Yeah.
sense. All right, Madison, this has been awesome. I appreciate you so much for sharing your story and everything that you've gone through and your knowledge as a health coach. 'Cause I feel like I said before, coaching is so important, and being able to help people overcome their own obstacles. I feel like as a coach, I mean, one of the top things you can do is help guide them through things. All right. It's not like you have all the answers, but you act as a guide in a sense. So I appreciate your work and everything that you do. Thank you again so much for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
If people want to learn more about you and your work, where can they go?
They can go to my website, wellwithmadison.com.
Awesome. Thank you again for coming on and sharing our insights with us. It's been awesome.
Thank you.